Hello everybody, Dr. Stringer back again. We are on to Module 9 now. We are talking about policing cybercrime this week. We have a pretty short module this week. I kept it pretty brief and figured this would be a good module to follow your midterm exam with, to give you a little bit of a lighter load this week, since you're probably all tired of talking and thinking about technology while you were studying for your exam last week. So this week you had 2 articles to read, and while some weeks you've had some more difficult articles to read, that wasn't really the case this week. So you had these should have been pretty easy for you to digest. The one of the ones we were looking at was Markham, Higgins, Friedberger, and Ricketts, and the other one is Bossler and Holt. And hopefully you will have read them, or will read them at some point this week. And so we're just going to talk about those for a few minutes. Pretty short lecture today, not a whole lot going on with these. Just some general knowledge for you to gain about cybercrime and the policing of cybercrime. So today it's interesting, we're not looking so much at technology and its use by the criminal justice system or the police and other members of the criminal justice system, but we're actually looking at the criminal justice system's response to crime committed using technology. So that is what cybercrime is, right? Because it requires technology to be able to commit it. So cybercrime and cybersecurity have been a big focus of Presidents Bush, Obama, and Trump in recent years because it's a very important thing. It's a growing thing within the criminal justice literature. We still don't know that much about it. We still don't know about all of the crime that does occur in cyberspace that you might consider to be called cybercrime. And that's because the DOJ, Department of Justice, does not have a good tracking measure of cybercrime. The last big one was in 2005, but many rates are actually reported by private companies such as IBM and others like that actually look at these things. Those of you that have actually taken courses on cybercrime and cybersecurity probably already know most of what we're going to talk about as far as thinking about cybercrime and cybersecurity, but you might not be that familiar with the policing of cybercrime aspects of things. So this is very different from your traditional personal or property crimes because it's not occurring on the street. And so the police are not as well equipped to deal with cybercrime, crime that's occurring over the internet, as they are crime that's occurring right outside on the street corner, and things like that they've been dealing with for thousands of years and have figured out different ways of combating it. So as a result of that, the criminal justice system is not well suited for dealing with it and handling it and policing it. And the other different thing about this that's interesting is cybercrime is often underreported. It's difficult to detect. It's very difficult to figure out when a cybercrime has occurred, how many of them there are, and just like any other crime, many of them do not get detected or reported for that matter. So there is that kind of what criminologists might consider the dark figure of crime with regard to cybercrime, being those crimes that are never reported to the police and we don't ever find out about. So looking at the Bossler and Holt article, they had several different research topics. The first one was the law enforcement agencies that line officers believe should be primarily responsible for investigating cybercrime. And so that sentence is a little odd, but that means that they're looking at whether the police officers believe that their primary response should be investigating cybercrime, as well as perceptions about the agency's current ability to respond to these offenses, and their beliefs regarding the best way to improve the social response to cybercrime. So those are the things that they're looking at. Their data comes from 2 agencies, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg PD in Charlotte, North Carolina, as well as the Savannah-Chatham PD in Savannah, Georgia, which you may have heard of. since we are in Georgia. Well, we're not that far from Charlotte either. But anyway, so they had 268 survey responses. They gave surveys out to police officers, in case you haven't read the article yet. 86.4% were male, 75% white, average 37% or 37 years old, and 40% had a 4-year degree. So those are just a few demographics. That's pretty much your standard demographics for police officers. It does vary a little bit across different departments, though. So, looking at what were the officers' experiences with cybercrime? How many officers had exposure to cybercrime? Well, only about 61% said that they'd never had an exposure to a cybercrime. So, I say only about 61%, but that's actually a lot that have never been exposed to a cybercrime case as police officers. And that could be a little bit of selectivity in there because you're asking regular line police officers on the street. And so you really should think about, too, your cybercrime is probably not going to be investigated by your regular, beat cop, so to speak, who's out, patrolling the streets. It's probably going to be some sort of specialized unit that's sitting behind a desk, kind of the way I am now, and investigating these things. So, of those 61%, about 16.9, about 17% had a case that was not more than 1 year ago. So there's a lot of them that are still having, cases that, have been going a long time ago. But then again, 16% of them have not occurred in more than a year ago, because this is an ongoing thing. It's a growing thing. Possibly because of the police not being able to respond to it like they can other crimes. Criminals are thinking, well, this is an easy avenue to commit crimes and potentially, gain money or whatever other things their goals are without so much risk of being caught. So it's an interesting way that the police aren't really using the technology, but the criminals are, which is an interesting thing to think about. So, the Bessler and Holt article estimated that about 11% of the officers had experiences with cybercrime. And so that's a pretty small amount. 11.6 had received cybercrime training. It seems like it was a little bit different between Charlotte and Savannah. Charlotte was putting more effort apparently into training officers in cybercrime, with 16% having cybercrime training, compared to Savannah, which only had about 7.6% of their officers had received cybercrime training. So the next thing that they look at too is, well, who should be responsible for cybercrime? Should it be the federal government? Should it be the state government? Should local law enforcement be trying to police this, or should it be some sort of a task force like I was talking about? Should the regular beat cops be trying to police it on their, you can't see my hands, but on their laptops, while they're also trying to deal with all the other crimes? Maybe not. But looking at what they found was that there's no real agreement from the law enforcement officers about whether state and federal agencies should be responsible. They don't really know. They don't have strong opinions about that. But about 40% said that law enforcement should not be responsible. Some people were happy to say that it should not be us. It should be someone else. But only about 19% said that it should be the responsibility of local law enforcement. And so that gets into some of the jurisdictional issues, because cybercrime often is not going to take place, for example, in one jurisdiction. So if you are a victim of cybercrime in Kennesaw, chances are the cyber criminal that criminalized you, or the victim, or I'm sorry, the suspect, is not in Kennesaw. So therefore the crime did not occur in Kennesaw. It crossed that boundary between, the Kennesaw police jurisdiction. Possibly might not even be in the state of Georgia. It might not even be in the United States. That person could be in China or somewhere else like that. And if that was the case, then the federal government wouldn't even really have jurisdiction over that. But looking at the final statistic there, 72.8%, almost 73% believe that cybercrime should be responded to by a computer crime unit. So that there should be some sort of specialized task force, perhaps a computer crime unit that deals with this. So, the local response to cybercrime, about 2/3 of officers thought most cybercrime goes unreported. Like I said, this isn't very surprising because most of regular offenses go unreported. So that about 2/3 are going unreported. That's not that different than most other crimes, with the exception of maybe murder and automobile theft and things like that. Murder gets reported for different reasons, but automobile theft tends to get reported most often because people want the insurance money, so that gets reported. It's a very high rate of being reported to police. But cybercrime, 2/3 of them we don't even know about. Only about 28% of officers believe that cybercrime is actually being taken seriously. They likely don't see it as part of their job. Only about 13% thought that upper management took cybercrime seriously. So that makes sense that the lower rank officers are not really going to take it that seriously if the upper ranking officers don't think it's a big deal. Now, if the higher ranking administrators start to think it's a big deal, then chances are opinions might shift a little bit, and they're going to convey that to people within their department. Anyway, so cultural support for cybercrime investigations. About 25% believe that real police work occurred on the street. Police officers want to be on the street. They don't want to be often, over here doing what we might consider to be nerd work, being in that computer crime unit. Although it probably would be a very lucrative career if you could get into it and you had some specialized expertise. I know the FBI would be interested in you. They're always hiring people to look at this kind of stuff because, like I said, it's a very difficult thing to track down and figure out. So it's something to think about. So about 41% believe that desk-based investigations are valuable for police work. And cybercrime investigations would be a kind of a desk-based investigation. You don't need to be out in the field. You don't need to be out in their squad car patrolling the streets and things like that. You can do it right from the desk. But only about 41% of the respondents believe that they're valuable, or that these types of investigations are valuable. So the authors also note that there is some support. I'm not as optimistic when looking at these results. I think that perhaps police officers might not be that interested in this type of stuff, and that might lead to some of the interesting things that are occurring. So anyway, strategies to improve the response to cybercrime. There were 4 non-police responses. That users should be more careful. That's the typical thing that we get. You need to have good anti-spyware on your computer. Be careful what websites you go to, links you click on, and opening emails and stuff like that. But also that penalties should be more severe for cybercrimes. So there should also be increased prosecution for cybercrimes. Legislation against cybercrimes. These are all non-police responses to things that could be done. So looking at, are the police absolving themselves of this role? Well, number 6, most important, is funding for police training. Most important is police training. You can't expect the police to do anything about these things if they're not trained in how to do it. Police officers go to the academy, they go to post-training, and they learn all sorts of methods for use of force and arrest procedures and DUI tests, field sobriety tests, traffic stops, armed suspects, you name it. But one of the things that's very often overlooked is this idea of cybercrime. And perhaps rightfully so, because not every officer needs to be concerned with this. Perhaps it should be a specialized unit. So, looking at the conclusions from the Bossler and Holt article, officers place less value on working with cybercrime entities relative to traditional policing strategies. Officers seem to value those more. Even those officers with experience in cybercrime have mixed attitudes regarding policing of cybercrimes. Perhaps they were doing it and they didn't really want to be. Sometimes we all have to do things that aren't really the things that we want to be doing in the interest of keeping our jobs. Anyway, So this generally is a disheartening finding to some extent. If the police absolve themselves of having to do any of this and say, okay, I don't want to deal with that, then who's responsible for it? Who should be dealing with it? And that's an interesting thing that you're going to be thinking about for your discussion board questions today, and I'm going to ask you all, well, who do you think should be responsible for it? If not the police, then who? Or should the police be responsible for it? Or are we just going to blame the victims and say you should have been more careful and not clicked on that link? That's up to you. We'll see what you have to say. So looking at the Markham and colleagues article, Markham, Higgins, Freeberger, and Ricketts from 2010, they looked at child pornography investigations and arrests. When you think about cybercrime, child pornography is probably pretty far up there on the level of seriousness of offense. And possibly when you don't even think about the seriousness of offense in cybercrime, just in crime in general, it's pretty high up there. It's not the equivalent of a speeding ticket or something like that. And so these are things to think about, that they picked an online crime that is very serious. And part of the reason why you're reading this article, too, is about that seriousness of crime, because it kind of brings to the point home that someone needs to be looking at this stuff and enforcing these laws to be able to catch these child porn people and these pedophiles and other people like that who are prowling the internets. So anyway, trainings and resources were dedicated to investigating such crimes. And so they looked into that. And the research design was that they had about 625 surveys sent to cities with a population of 50,000 or more. They got 168 back. So that's not a very good response rate. It's about 26.9% response, but it's not that uncommon. Oftentimes you send out surveys and you don't get responses back. You guys have probably gotten all sorts of requests to do surveys, in your student emails and things like that. And try to think about that when you're, not filling them out. That's somebody's research that you can help them out with. Someday you might be a researcher and need someone to help you out with your research. I know that I don't really do that kind of research, but I still try to do them just for the good karma points. But anyway, so looking at the descriptive statistics from Markham and colleagues, 30% had a designated child porn task force in their department. 41% have departmental training in this area. 48% had an investigation in 2007, and 51% had an investigation in 2008. 31% had an arrest in 2007, and 51% had an arrest in 2008. So in 2008, it looks like they had an arrest for about all of the investigations, but it was not the case in 2006. So the investigation results. Well, large departments and police departments with a designated task force were more likely to investigate this sort of behavior. That makes sense, right? If you have a designated child porn task force, then you should be investigating these sorts of things. If they're not, then I don't know what they're doing. But anyway, so departments in the South were less likely to investigate child pornography, which is a kind of another disheartening finding as well, but is not central to our discussion here. But anyway, so moving on, looking at the arrest results, large departments with police departments with a designated task force were more likely to also make an arrest. So not only were they more likely to investigate these crimes, they're more likely to make an arrest too. So these task forces do seem to be being effective to some extent. And also mandated departmental training increased the likelihood of arrest. And so one thing you need to think about too, as far as using a designated task force to investigate these things, is that you're going to have to actually go as an investigator when you're trying to catch child porn people. You're going to have to go onto the internet and try to find the people that are doing it. Just in the same way that you're going to have to try to go and find the rapists, robbers, and murderers on the street, you're going to have to go on the internet to do it. So I guess my point is, you're going to need to have specialized task force that are sitting at a desk and trolling for this material all the time to be able to find the people that are doing it. And frankly, it's probably not something that most police officers want to do, because that doesn't sound like a very good job. They'd much rather be out catching rapists and robbers and murderers than child porn people. Or trying to, you'd have to determine if something is child porn before you can arrest the person for it. So no one wants to look at that either. But anyway. So the big conclusions from all of this is that it's really not clear who is responsible for policing cybercrime. There is just kind of a generalized lack of desire to do it, but it is something that needs to be done. And there's also the big jurisdictional problem. Like I said, if someone hacks into your computer, chances are that person is not in Kennesaw or wherever jurisdiction you're in. If you're robbed on the street in downtown Kennesaw, which I've never heard of actually happening, then the Kennesaw police are clearly going to have jurisdiction over that. But, these geographic jurisdictions work for street crime. They don't necessarily work as well for, your cyber crimes, because they tend to cross these jurisdictional boundaries. So if it was a crime that crossed county boundaries or something like that, then the GBI could clearly investigate that. But what if it crossed state lines? Could the FBI investigate it? Sure. So maybe that's an option. But as far as cybercrime that crosses country boundaries, if someone's in Mexico, hacking you, that could be much more challenging. Then again, we kind of go into Mexico and do whatever we want to because we give them so much aid. But if it was someone from Russia, you've all heard the Russian hacking issues as of late. Chances are Putin's not going to want you going over there and fishing around and trying to find hackers over there. So that might be something else to think about too. But clearly, we need more information, and we need a group of individuals who are ready to tackle cybercrime and cybersecurity issues. So if any of you are interested in this type of stuff, it's something to think about. There's a big market for people right now, so if you're thinking about looking for jobs, there's a lot of jobs out there for people that are into cybercrime and cybersecurity right now. So those are all things to think about. So please don't forget to do your discussion boards and your quizzes for this week. Like I said, your discussion board is to just give us your opinion on who should be responsible for policing cybercrime. So if you'll do that, and maybe you guys will come to a good consensus and solve the problem of cybercrime with your discussion this week. So with that, that's all I have for this week, and please email me if you have any questions, and I will of course post your midterm grades as soon as I get those done. So everybody have a good week, and see you next time.